Hey, woodworkers. Alright, so talking about transferring the dimensions from inside mortise to mortise to what's going to create our handle or stretcher or whatever. In this application, this for our toolbox, this is going to be the handle, but the operation is very much the same. So going from worse to better, if I were to use a tool like this and try to get exact dimensions, first of all, there's no good way to get in here and find inside to inside dimensions with a tool like this. Even if I were to measure outside to outside, there's still a margin of error here where it's not quite exacting enough. I would say measuring from the bottom creates some benefits, but measuring up to the top, you can start to push too hard where this starts to flex one way or the other. You could start getting lazy with how much pressure you're putting on the tops either side. So this is one option, but I don't love it. The first thing I want to do, and it goes kind of without saying, I need to get the joinery done here and here, get this thing dry fit, and that's where we're at. But I also need to check to make sure that these sections are totally square. If they're out at all, that will cause some problems. So, alright, so if these are square, then that's great. And like I said, I could set this on top possibly and then make some lines here, which is okay. But I think going down to the interior corners where we have the least amount of movement, that's desirable. And so that's what I'm going to do. Alright, so again, worst to better, I could use a pencil and I could start marking these things in. This leaves a pretty heavy line as far as layouts go. So a better option would be to use a mechanical pencil and then just trace this interior line here and here. Without moving this piece, that would work, and that's probably okay. I prefer to use a marking knife in situ here, so this thing is the final decision and location of all these things. I can come in here with my marking knife and make a little mark here and here. And once I have those, then I'm able to pull this thing out and really start to transfer the location of all the elements. With the marking knife, make sure that I'm still on camera, and I'm not. Here we are. Ah, lovely. Alright. With the marking knife, life gets a lot easier here because I can put my marking knife into the mark I just made, bring a square to it, and then continue to score this around to all the parts and pieces that I need, and carrying this thing all the way around. Alright, I'm going to do the same to the other end, but I'm going to walk through the process. If all four of these lines connect to one singular spot here, where this line and this line intersect, that means that this board has been perfectly squared, and that's important because when laying out the joinery, which is the next step, you need to make sure that that's not going to be a limitation. So I do that on both ends. I prefer the marking knife, and then after I'm done with the marking knife everywhere, I like to really identify the location. Oops. There we go. The location of this line with a pencil. It just makes life a lot easier for seeing exactly where this mark is. And if I don't lay it out with a pencil, then I'm relying 100% on the shadow that's being created by the knife line that I made, and that's sometimes good, sometimes tricky depending on lighting. But I'll do the same on the other end. Once I've done that, then I know exactly the dimensions, and then that makes life a lot easier to cut to it. Next step's about locating the location of the mortise, I would transfer the lines over, which I'll do now. Right, bottom of that mortise, a little tick mark there, top of the mortise, a little tick mark right there. So by doing this, oops, then I'll know exactly where this needs to translate to, and it makes laying this out simpler. Do this to the other end as well. And then lastly, I'll bring up these lines to the very end of the board. So following up position of the mortise, oops, okay. By marking this one out, I'll do it on both ends. I can start to position this to make sure that I'm where I need to be. Once that happens, then I'll carry those lines straight up here on this board, probably using a square to find the location of those lines, and then carry them up. But I would have to do some measuring to make sure that I know where this thing goes, and I don't want to mark one end and then have the other end skewed, so I will have to make marks here. But by doing this, then I can translate locations of first the shoulder and then center point of thickness of this board. If you're going to go with center, typically makes sense. And then I'll do the same operation. Whoops. Do the same operation here to carry up the line, up the edges here and here. I hope some or any of that was on camera. I'm guessing this last part was not. Oh no, it might have been. Alright. So, at any point, that's how I would start laying this thing out, so I know exactly where to start cutting. Excuse me. Just as a reminder, we always want to start with the mortises. Once the mortises have been cut, then we can start cutting the tenons, and it's very hard to do it the other way. So, mortises first, get those things dialed in, and then we're ready to jump ship into our next step for the operation. Alright, I will check back with you once I get the joints cut and show you how it looks.